I'm Todd, and I was naughty. I did everything wrong. I got kicked out of art school, I drank heavily, and I looked to other religions and versions of spirituality to get fulfilled. The problem was, I was in the occult and I didn't even know it. My life was a wreck, and I had to learn what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus.
And I'm Laura. I was super nice. I did everything right. I got saved young, went to Moody Bible Institute, got married, and followed the Christian rules to having a good life. Problem was, that formula didn't work. I had to change how I related with Jesus.
At the end of the day, what I learned is the very simple truth. Jesus is the answer, and the only one that will ever actually fulfill you.
Naughty
versus
nice.
And welcome back to Naughty versus Nice. Thank you very much for joining us. I, of course, am Todd, and with me always is
Laura.
And we do have my lovely wife, producer Kelly, sitting right next to me. Of course, she's not talking. She doesn't have her own microphone this time because we are doing a part 2 with Laura's oldest son, Abe, and his lovely wife, Addison. They are joining us in studio. We were talking before about, we just wanted to get kind of a different perspective. It's one thing to have, people on our end of, things, the Gen X side of things, talking about what's going on in the world and the different perspective, the Christian versus the naughty, or the nice versus the naughty perspective on what's happening in the world. It's another thing to get a younger perspective. So we have them in studio. We're talking about things and how their lives are the same, how their lives are different from where we're at, and just trying to get their point of view on what's been going on. Guys, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Cool, man. So we were talking before about a bunch of things. I want to switch gears, though, since we're doing like kind of a second episode. The idea was posed to me that you guys apparently have, at least Addie, you have kind of an impression of me when we first had the opportunity, when we first met. And you got a story that goes along with it. I don't think I've ever heard it, so let's hear it. What are your thoughts? I know, right?
Well, I actually met all three of you the same night, but before I was brought to meet everyone, Abe did mention that you taught him to punch and beat him up, so that was a little concerning. He basically felt like everyone had really cool jobs. He was like, oh, she's an author and this, and he's a fashion designer. So I had perceptions of everyone in my head. Then we are pulling up because his brother was playing football, so we met at a football game. And he looked at me and he was like, by the way, if these people don't like you, we're done. Just so you know.
It was implied, not said.
It wasn't
verbatim.
No, it was something was said to the point where I was like, oh gosh.
No pressure, right?
So we walk in and I made him take a second. I was like, I just need what's I was doing deep breaths. And then we walk up and Laura was watching the game, which now that I know that she loves football so much, but at first I was like, I hope she likes me. But you were trying not to scare me because it was a big audience. And then Kelly sat by me for a bit and was grilling me. You were like, do you want to have kids? Do you want to get married? Why do you like Abe? So I thought that was funny, especially now that I know you. I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense. But at the time I was like, I want to be. And then Abe kept leaving too, so I kept just sitting there by myself. I think I texted him. I was like, please stop going to the bathroom, talking to everybody, and getting popcorn. And then Todd, I don't think you said you were very pleasant, but because you were a fashion designer, you were wearing black and you had this long coat, and so I was like, oh, he's so fashionable. And then now that I know you, it's just what you always wear.
Correct, I know, right? It's people think I'm joking when I'm literally a comic book character in the Sunday Funnies or something.
I know, but everyone was very kind. I could tell that you guys were a tight-knit group, and you were all very supportive of Mark.
What about the first time you heard Todd start talking about how basically everything's the devil?
I felt very concerned. I was like, oh, he's a fashion designer, conspiracy theorist. We all have our thing. And
I know, I sound like a psycho. Yeah.
But the more you started to talk, the more I was it freaked me out more because I was like, oh, I think he's actually onto something. I kind of felt like the Matrix, where you gave me the red pill or whatever, and I was like, oh, I don't think I can see things the way I used to, and that's a little scary.
Well, speaking about that, okay, so let's kind of run with that for a second. Growing up in a homeschool environment and having curricula that is produced by different companies or whatever. I'm sure your parents and I think it was a co-op that you went to. Yeah. They picked out their curriculum, but there were reasons for why they did it. I would assume, and obviously it's a Christian-based educational system that they had set up. I'm assuming that the concept of evil was never really talked about, that it wasn't talked about that, you've got this creature, Lucifer, running around with his little minions of doom, and that they're real creatures really doing real stuff with real plans in the real physical world. I'm assuming it wasn't touched on all that much.
Yes, I would say since like I said before in the first part 1, we talked about me doing that Bible study fellowship. So it's like my parents really valued that I knew the Bible deeply and would have those kinds of conversations, probably not at the same level that Laura was having with Abe, but
I'm neurotic though, so.
But I did feel like I had a better understanding than most of my peers did. But I would say, so separating my family from the equation, I would say yes overall. I don't think we never really talked about demons. We never really talked about, we talk about the devil, but it was almost like comical.
Like like a general kind of way, like he was more of a like concept. It wasn't a real creature. He's
bad and he wants us to do bad things.
Right.
It was just kind of it. And it was, so, I don't know. I felt like I feel like I've grown, and even now, so I almost feel like the wool is like even still being pulled off of my eyes, but I think my parents did a better job of that than anything I got based out of like the curriculum that we were given.
I was doing a text with somebody, and I just said this off to them earlier. The church has done everything it can. This is out of context, obviously, but kind of leads to what we're talking about. The church has done everything it can to ignore Satan, and it only wants to pay attention to Jesus. And I'm like, this isn't really quite right. We are to glorify Jesus, and we can pay attention to Satan, but done so in proper context. The Bible says that we are to be wise as serpents. I think the use of the serpent imagery and the use of the word wisdom is specifically used in order to kind of focus in on an area. Say, you guys need to be aware of this stuff. But meaning we're to be aware of Satan, that he exists, his methods, but not to elevate him to be on the same level that God is. And I argue that when we ignore Satan, and I believe it's a form of thinking that God and Satan somehow are equals. Like, if I properly ignore him, I won't be feeding him, so therefore he won't overtake God in power, which goes, ironically, back to this Luciferian doctrine, this concept of dualism, this idea that Satan and God are somehow equals, when they're not. Satan is part of the creation. He is just as much of a threat to God as the plumber down the street, is kind of the example that I use. To us, he's a complete threat. Don't get me wrong. He's a completely overwhelming, irresistible force, for lack of a better way to put it. But when it comes to God, like, it's nothing. It's like, dandruff on the shoulder. You just flick it off.
Yes. Well, the other thing, too, that I would say is in my co-op, we didn't really talk about, I don't feel like, Christianity. Like, we would pray, but that was it. So if anything, it almost had, like, we weren't talking about things ever, because it was like almost like the parents want to kind of be in charge of what their kid knows, and so it's like we would gather to just do academics, and there would be threads of it, like we wouldn't do evolution or something like that. Right. But yeah, I feel like everyone kind of just, that's your church, and then you do with that what you want. And we would talk about it amongst ourselves, but it wasn't like in the curriculum so much.
Did you get the impression that the parents, their point of view, or at a minimum the people kind of running the co-op, I guess, that the church was the proper, appropriate place for learning about godly things, or was it the parents' responsibility to do it at home, and then the church was like a backup for it, or was it the other way around? Did it even come up? Does it matter? I mean, we know Laura's point of view,
I would say it was probably be the parents first and foremost. They wanted to kind of filter whatever their kid was getting, just across the board, but Christianity, pop culture, anything. It was like, you will only be exposed to what I want you to be exposed to, or you will only understand or think like through my words. And then church was just kind of sort of partnered with that, I guess, but I don't know. It was like just very small time. Like everyone kind of went to the same youth group, couple of youth groups. It was like we all did school together. It was very like everyone knew your business.
I don't know if you had a follow-up or...
I honestly didn't hear your first question. So I was sorry. I was taking an Advil, and I was like, I came back in, and you're like, well, that's what Laura says, and I was like, I guess so.
Because I know your strong theological the need and desire and the want to have theology be such a large cornerstone in your life. The idea I think that most people would have in culture today is that church is the place that you're supposed to learn about things of God, all things God, Christianity itself, not necessarily in the home. And the church needs to be the thing to do it. Like, we had the distinct impression with doing youth group that was our job. That was our role, was to teach the kids Christian, and we could tell the families that made it a point to educate as well at home versus the families that didn't. I'm not saying one's better than another, somebody's bad. I'm not saying anything like that. It's just becomes very, very clear that we have this way in which we operate where we almost segment absolutely everything. The idea, the only time you're supposed to learn math is at school. Well, you can learn it at home too, and you can learn at your job, and you should always be learning. You should always be involved. And
Abe, how do you think it came through in your background? I mean, I know we went to church and you were at youth group, but how do you think it? I know how I think I approached it, but how did it
come across?
Yeah, how did it come across from your experience?
Can you define it?
Theology, like just how did we interact? How were you educated about the Lord personally, scripturally, or whatever, in the home? Was it more, did you have the sense that it was the job of the church, or did we, how did it come across as we approached that as a family?
Was a pretty dynamic process. I mean, you were always talking about it. I mean, we went to church consistently. All our family friends were like Christians, so it was just kind of like a consistent theme. Like, I would go do landscaping with my youth group leader. Like, we would be talking about that stuff, and so it was always more dynamic. I think the duality of it came in when I was at school, kind of like what you talked about last episode. I rode the fence because that was my community at home, but my community at school wasn't rooted in any of that. Like, it wasn't even like a common belief. It was just, I had friends that were Christians at school, but it wasn't the base environment of school.
It wasn't woven in throughout everything that was going on.
Yeah.
It was a separate thing.
Yeah.
This school and like secular, if that's the word for it, that was a different thing entirely. Christianity was just a part of who you were, not interwoven within.
What I do appreciate, though, because it makes it sound, I said earlier you were on the fence on, you weren't fake with me, though. So I knew I knew you were sitting on the fence. So you didn't come home and feed me a line about just everything being all about Jesus every day, every moment of your life. And so I appreciated that. I'd just rather know where you were. But yeah, I remember being segmented, but I just didn't know. I'm always telling people it happens organically. And so it's what I used to call Honda time, but I didn't plan it. We didn't do quiet times or devotions or something like that. But somehow, and sometimes I don't know, people will say, well, how did you get those ideas? I don't know, probably because I prattle on about it constantly. And then we met Todd and Kelly, and so Todd would be over prattling constantly. And so there's constant background noise of it. You just couldn't get away from it. Is that your experience?
So accurate.
He's just nodding. He's totally
so true.
Yep.
So where you guys are at right now in your lives, like we were talking about, it's just you're soaked in it now, or it's just part of your life. It's all of our friend groups and who we interact with and stuff. Everybody's basically Christian. Not everyone, but 95%, of what our lives are like. So the idea of just striking up a conversation about God or Christ or an interesting thing you just learned, it's not out of place, at least for us in the way that we live our lives. For you guys and where you're at, you moved away and you got your own thing now, your own life that you're building. Where's the education coming from for you guys and how you go about things? Is it the season that you're in right now? Look, man, I got to focus on work, and I got to, we still go to church. I know that you guys have a church that you go to, but that's basically it for where we're at. We got all these other things we're trying to juggle. Or are you guys, is your social media, the media and the influences that you're bringing into your life? I don't know. I don't know if I have a general question with that, or what does it look like, I guess would be. A person your age and where they're at, what would it look like?
For us, it does look like going to church on Sunday. I see we recently moved from one town to another, but at the old church at the other town, a lot of the people our age were involved in, they came on Sundays. They usually volunteered in some aspect at the church. They came back on Wednesdays for this group, or if they were older, they had another group. So it was something I thought that church did well, is creating a community instead of just, we all just show up on Sunday and talk about the weather. For the typical Christian our age, I think there's a lot of opportunities for that. I mean, with anything, it is what you make it. Like, we can show up and, hang our heads low and get out real quick at the end of the day. Like,
right.
I see that. I think that's been our experience in bigger churches, more modern churches. That's the take they go on it. There is a lot to get involved in. I personally like podcasts and books.
A long pause.
That's about it that I do. But
I was going to say, like, even high school to college, I felt like the transition that my faith needed to be something that I cared about. So it was like, whether that was a quiet time or joining a Bible study or things like that, I think it's mostly just important to know, like, yourself and how you're going to grow. So if you need accountability, be involved. If you're, like to do a devotional and listen to a sermon, then do that. But I think that's mainly my friend's approach, is just how involved do they want to be with it, kind of like what Abe said. And
yeah, it's
how
like that transition that happens from, this is the way the structure was when we were a kid growing up, and it was almost, it's at a certain point people be like, well, I don't want to brainwash my kid. Look, somebody's going to brainwash your kid. Somebody's going to influence your kid. Somebody's going to indoctrinate your kid. Is it going to be culture, or is it going to be you? You get to choose that. Who do you think's going to do it then if it's not you? Fill your kid up with everything you want them to have that you think is good and of value and wholesome, and let them take it forward in the future. Don't let it be culture, for crying out loud.
I will say too, there's as far as like the contemporary Christian, there is almost, we were kind of like poo-pooing on social media and everything in part one, but there is a branch of that Christianity has grown into. I think they're like popular Christian influencers, there's popular Christian podcasts, there's Christian TV shows and stuff like that. So I think you see a lot of people lean into those things. Some of them are great, some of them aren't, but it's always there. Like, I think going back to my experience, went to this Christian college. I may not have agreed with everything I heard, but at least I was talking about Christianity the whole time. It was a part of the culture, versus high school. It was just kind of something I kept on the side.
Right. The idea of, as you transition from where your parents raised you and how things were kind of structured to being out on your own, being married, young couple, organizing yourselves and doing your own life and finding out who you are in the process, there's, like you had said, Addie, it's you're taking something that was kind of this thing that was almost outside of you, and then you're bringing it into who you are, making it a part of your identity, a part of who you are and how you interact with the world and see yourself. And that has to be nurtured. It has to be fed. It has to be educated, for lack of a better term for it. And Abe, you were talking about different social media and having access to that. Aside from podcasts that are awesome, like Naughty versus Nice, what are some other social media influencers, or what are resources or things that you think are a good source, or something you found to be edifying for you? I hate using that word edifying, but it's like something that's helping you stay hooked in or stay kind of plugged in.
I think for me, my mom's a pretty big Tim Keller fan.
What?
And so I've...
No!
I do like, he's got his team. I mean, he's since passed away, but his team still posts his sermons at least multiple times a week. I try to keep a revolving door. I just don't like to listen to the same thing all the time. So I'll usually listen to one of his podcasts. He writes good books too that I like. I listen to this podcast once a week.
What about some of the, even the health ones, or Fight the New Drug, or any of those kinds of, there's anything like that? Yeah,
Fight the New Drug has a lot of content just in general. They have a podcast called Consider Before Consuming that's helpful.
I have no idea who they are or what they're doing.
Fight the New Drug is a non-religious, non-political
organization.
Yeah, non a lot of things. Organization that's essentially trying to educate people about porn.
Okay.
And how it is the newest drug. And I mean, they're like, we won't even come out and say you shouldn't watch porn. We just want you to know what you're choosing when you choose it. I'm a big fan of their organization. They have a ton of great content, lots of apps that they promote. And then, I think we talked about the Huberman Labs podcast. Something I find interesting in my own interest and experience is that there's overlap between what God says you should do and what science 2,000 years finds out is good for you.
Right.
Like even Andrew Huberman, one of his big things is, get up and see the sun first thing in the day. It's really good for your eyes. It sets your circadian rhythm and a bunch of nerd stuff. But I always, whenever he's talking about that, I think about like the Bible verse about, getting up early and spending time with the Lord and stuff. And so there's a lot of overlap between those things. I don't know. That's something I'm interested in, is the bettering yourself in science. And
basically a nerd. Somehow I have three 3 nerd children.
That's one of the areas we all get along on, so it works for me, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you ask your average 50-year-old, you know, what's manga? They don't even know. I'm like, oh, dude, I can give 5 titles off the top of my head that I still read, you know, that I think are great, so.
Big true crime guy too, but that doesn't.
That
That usually works in the other direction.
So I get one of the what it sounds like. Whereas when you were in high school, there was a separation. There was who you were, and then your Christianity was kind of put on the side. But it sounds like where you're at right now, you're integrating all of that together. So you're not saying, ew, the science. You're just like, no, science is just reflecting what God's creation actually is. There's a way to incorporate these things into my life so that they can all work together for God, not only God's glory, but for my good.
Yeah. I think I made the joke recently about something, but I said, you know, to Addie, like, oh, yeah, God's in control, but I still live in a physical world and I have to do things. There's stuff to do. There's important stuff to do, but there's also fun stuff I like to do, and I think it's okay to like that stuff. I like to listen to true crime and stuff, but one of the things I tell Addie is that I think I'll go to heaven and still hit bench press.
Addie's totally like shaking her head.
Because it's like that's something I enjoy. It's, you know, I'm taking care of my body, and you can still, you know, work out for the wrong reasons or whatever, to be prideful and stuff like that, obviously. But I think like there are things, I have no idea if this is pertinent to your question anymore, but it's something I believe in. Like, we're here to experience the world. We should experience it correctly, but, you know, I like anime and music and
comic books,
working out,
nerds,
and The Walking Dead, and Star Wars.
Well, and we've talked about too that there's multi forms of worship too. So like your interests can be in a worshiping way. So for example, like if you really like psychology and you want to study the brain, or like Abe loves bettering himself, it's like you can incorporate that. It doesn't have to be separate all the time.
Mm-hmm. All of life is worship.
Oh, I'm going to say a completely radical thing right now. I feel like you can be Christian and watch a show like The Walking Dead. I think that it's entirely possible to do. There's this, and I realize the irony of everything's the devil. You know, I'm that guy. I'm literally that guy. But by becoming aware of how these things creep in, the mechanisms that are used, the messaging that goes along with it, you can identify it, whether it's a kid's cartoon or whether it's The Walking Dead. That's the evil, bad thing that you want to be able to, as your mom talks about, that you want to get your screen tighter and tighter and tighter so you can filter these things out. Yeah, is The Walking Dead the best show out there for, you know, everybody? No, it's not. Okay,
but there's a whole lot of interesting nature of sin, nature of man without law. Like there's just all those.
A lot of parallels. Yeah,
the show is much more interesting relationally than it is really like, oh, there's a zombie behind the door.
Which is the glue that binds it all together. Let's shoot some zombies. But when we recognize what is in culture, the messaging of it, and how it shows up, it makes it so that, yes, maybe, you know, The Walking Dead's not the best thing for everybody, but it's not the show that's evil. It's the material or the content or the messaging that you need to be able to screen out. The same way as Blue's Clues or any of these other kid shows. I'm not saying Blue's Clues is bad. I don't know, but I'm sure there's some kid shows that are out there that probably have the same themes, the same messaging, and the same stuff that, you know, kids are getting exposed to. We think that's fine, but then we look at another show, you know, and we're like, "Oh no, you can't watch that." I don't know. I feel like I prattled on about that a little bit longer
No,
than
I
I
think
should
that
have.
was very good.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I don't know, as a well-versed pop culture guy, I think you see people who are like, oh, you shouldn't watch this because it's violent and stuff like that. No, to a point, yeah, that's important to appropriately filter things, especially for your kids and stuff. But, I mean, someday you turn 18, you find out, like, I'm allowed to watch The Walking Dead whenever I want, how many times I want. So if you aren't equipped to handle that, you've actually been set up for failure.
Well, I'll give you an example, a real-world example. Like, there's this show called The Boys. I don't know if you guys have ever watched. It's like superheroes. It's based off Mark Millar. He's a Scottish or Irish writer, real popular in comics back in the late 90s and stuff. And he sold Miller World, I think, to Netflix for a really, like, a lot of money. And The Boys is one of his concepts. Now, it's the idea of what happens when the good guys are actually kind of the bad guys. I think they're in season 3 or season 4. I stopped watching it. It got to a point where it was like edgy, you know, and it was kind of, you know, you're like, oh, wow, okay, you know, put your filters up and see what you're seeing, you know, and recognize what it is. And then it got to a point where it just went into like depravity and vulgarity on a level that I was like, okay, I'm done with this, man. It's too far. It's too much for me, and I haven't followed it, and I don't want to. For me, for where I'm at, that's not a show that's going to be something that I need to be bringing into, you know, my home, bringing into my life, and that kind of thing. So when it comes to the ideas of media, entertainment, the church that you guys are in, or maybe the friend groups that you guys are in, other Christians that are kind of in your life, how does that show up in your relationships with them? And I guess what I'm kind of driving at or wondering about is there culturally now within a younger culture, you need to do this in order to be a good Christian, or you need to not do this in order to be a good Christian? Or is your church talking about some of these things regarding media, social media, and these influences that are in our life? And, well, if you're going to be a member of this church, you shouldn't be watching The Walking Dead.
I felt that more at school, but just in day-to-day life, I feel like people are afraid to have those conversations, if anything, just to be, like, they don't want to turn people off, or it's kind of like, we don't talk about politics or something, like
right.
Stuff like that, instead of, I mean, obviously with like very trusted friends, I would say that is like conversations we have, but for the most part, I feel like it's just with us or with you guys.
I was going to, along that, like, I think there's almost a concerning lack of appropriate conduct in modern Christianity. It's like, there are things that you can watch and consume and filter for yourself, and there are some things where if you tell me, like, oh, I like this, I'm like, oh, you almost are like, kind of like, you tack your approval onto this thing, and I'm like, I don't know if you can hold that approval and what I would consider Christian values at the same time. It's such a fine line between, like, oh, you should never do this, and, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, I get irritated by that too, because it's wrong. But
it's difficult to say you're Christian, but really, really, really love the 50 Shades of Grey series.
Yeah.
You know kind of what I'm saying?
And that
Great example.
Yeah. You know.
And that's not, that.
And that's I've had that in our generation. I mean, that's a church. I don't know, maybe it started with our generation, but I've had a great deal of women who would sit down with me and agree about my stance in men and pornography. And they will turn around and endorse things that are movies, whatever, that are shows that are incredibly pornographic. And they don't blink. It doesn't hit them at all as something that they would feel uncomfortable about. And I'm always like, well, that's a double standard if I've ever heard one. But there's no behavioral filter at all. Like in people, they don't seem to, something didn't transfer. Because you guys came home from school saying that a lot, that a lot of students at the school had not been raised within the church to think that premarital sex was a problem. Like, they did not see that as an ethical issue at all, or a very low percentage. Is that fair? Is that kind of what you saw?
Yes, I would say so, but I would also say people would, like, lie about it, like, if that makes sense. Like,
so if they lied, they knew it was wrong.
Yeah, so, like,
wait,
they would just smudge the lines of it, if that makes sense.
Is your age demographic using the term body count?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know the term body count, Laura?
Not unless it's a cop show.
Right? It's no, I'm just saying that's one of the things the youngsters say. It's like, how many people have you slept with? They call it, what's your body count? That's the term that they use. Yeah.
But it's not like, at least at our school, it wasn't like something people were proud of. It was like they want to keep their image clean, but it was also like people were being like, I'm not trying to dog people, but just not, they weren't having honest conversations about what they were doing or consuming, or they would just not hit the mark.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's a little bit like when you talk about living in two different realities with social media. It's two different realities. And so they're one person for everyone else, and they're one person privately, but they feel that both are true. Mm-hmm. And you actually, I've actually run into this outside this generation. So where you've heard this person say something in their one personality and you believe them, and later you're like, well, it was a lie. But no, it really wasn't, because they believe so much who they are in that reality, that the statement they made, they meant at the time. But the other person betrays that truth, because they don't live in alignment with it. It's kind of hard to explain unless you've experienced it. But I find that double life, it's an inner double life, and it has to collapse with time. You won't see it for another 10 years is what I always say. But it has to. A house divided cannot stand. It's not just a household. It's a person within themselves. You cannot be two people consistently and not destroy yourself.
And that's what I would argue. That's the dualism concept, and that's also magic. That's a version of it, which we'll talk about on a different episode when we talk about the last stage of the Luciferian doctrine and what that is and how it shows up. And yeah, it's remarkably unhealthy way to conduct yourself, because you're always going to be one way or the other trying to remember the lies and trying to remember what you said one place and what you said another. It's just, I don't know, man, it's just not a good way to do it.
I will say on that note, as far as like modern Christians, our pastor at our other church, he just preached like a really good sermon about how godly people can't do that. You can't come to church and talk about one thing and then go home and do another, because you don't feel like a godly person when you do. I mean, there's people out there still saying like you can't do that. Like, you're not accomplishing a godly lifestyle if you're doing this.
No, it's a good message, man. And I think that it needs to be put out there, especially with the duality that's going on with the person in social media, how they present themselves and how they interact within the world itself.
And I will say, too, just to his credit, like, he preached about how you don't just one day be like, oh, Holy Spirit, fill me in now I don't have a drink. He's like, you bring that darkness in your life into the light with fellow Christians. You work with people, you are public about it, and you address it, and it isn't like a you're saved or not saved kind of thing. Like, so he was healthily authentic about it.
You're not harboring a secret shame or something like that. You're better off doing it. I always try to say, well, what's it like doing youth group? Oh, I tell kids about drugs and alcohol all the time, and all the drugs and all the alcohol I ever did. I don't see a problem with it. It's like, what? I don't know. Should you be? Yeah, you should be telling appropriately in a proper context. Yes, you should be telling 13-year-olds what a life looks like when you drink heavily. They need to know.
This, and me, I don't remember where we are with what question we're at, but I'm remembering some of your stories from when you and groups of students would go and kind of preview other churches in the college community. What were you seeing predominantly coming from the pulpit in worship and sermon, all that? And then what did you think of how your co-students were evaluating it? Like, how tight was the screen door, and how rare is it to find people with a tighter grid like that? I think they're there, because you just pointed out that your church, you've mentioned him several times. He's saying good stuff. I'm impressed. So it's good to hear that that's there. But I'm just wondering, how common was that as you were going through that at college?
I would say when we would go try out different churches, I don't feel like the messages were ever like super deep. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have to decide what you cared about. Like, this church is very involved, or these messages are good, or the music's great. And so you kind of just had to decide like what mattered to you most and kind of find a church based off of that. But I think the biggest impression that I always had is, no matter what was said or how it was done or whatever, we'd walk away and be like, that was great.
All the other kids were saying that?
Yeah. It was like, well, why was it great? Or like, what? There was just, that was it. It was like, we did church, that was good. And it's not like it's not authentic. I almost feel bad because I don't think people are having conversations with them. So it's like, how are you supposed to look for something that you don't know is even meant to look there? And when, like, if you would bring something up and push back, they would kind of be like, oh, like, that's true. But that wasn't their initial reaction to go in it with that tighter screened door, like you would say.
It was almost like a blind trust in what was being given to them, and they were not angry, but a little bit surprised that you didn't immediately trust what was said to you. And you would say like, well, I disagreed with this, or I thought this about this statement. They'd be like, oh, okay. And I still don't really know, like, that was the extent of the conversation, but
it was baffling to them at a certain point, like that was even an option.
Yeah.
Like, you're allowed to think about this? What?
Or even the idea that, my pastor may not know what he's talking about something, or may make a mistake like that. It's not, pastors suck or anything like that, but you should be thinking 50% of the thinking should be from the pulpit, 50% of it should be from your own head.
Right. So, like, in along those lines, are there areas that you see that churches are doing well? They're speaking to young adults and where they're at in their life. Are there things that you've experienced in any of the churches or stuff? It's really being addressed. They're really speaking to you guys and where you're at, and it's working well. Or are there areas that are lacking? They're just not even noticing that this is going on. Is there something that's been happening like that, or?
I feel like the church we go to is really good about that. And I think because they want people to be involved, that kind of helps people grow as well, because the idea is we have the message, and then it's like, then you have your group, and you're going to meet with your group, and you're going to kind of talk about the message, and then maybe you're going to do something else with just your group. So, but I don't think people always think of faith or Christianity or being in the church as that level of unpacking something, of looking at it from different angles, of challenging each other. It's even kind of like what we were just saying, like, oh, what'd you think of this? Like, oh, I didn't even think you could talk about that. It's like, that's what people just accept. It's like, it's spoken, and then where are we going to eat after church? And then it's just dropped, and I don't think it's filtered through your head. Okay.
I think that it sounds like what you're talking about is the idea that people will tend to just go on Sunday, like fulfill the requirements. I'm a good person. I went to church. When you have all these other opportunities, maybe to get plugged into a young adults group, you have an opportunity like the trend of small groups. I'm sure that's still going on in many places. In an opportunity, whether it's even like a men's or a women's Bible study or a young adults Bible study or something. One of the things that was I surprised? I might have been surprised. I know of a guy who's a pastor, and he grew up in the United States, went down to Mexico to do some charity work and stuff down there, and then mission work, and then he ended up staying basically. And then he was down there for basically like 20 years, and then he ended up coming back to the United States, and he's working with a church, here in the United States. And one of the things that he said to me that was, I guess, a surprise was, where we were at in Mexico, like church was an integral part of almost every day of a person's life. It wasn't something for just Sunday. They had something going on all the time. Something was always, there was an aspect of it where the believer there was, the church itself was, and God himself was like the center that they revolved around. So they were always participating in something that was going on at church. Every night of the week, basically, church had something going on, and they were always involved. And I don't know what the solution is here in the United States. Look, Kelly and our lives are, crazy busy as it is. But there's a part of that's something that I kind of really like. I really like the idea of it becomes a foundation or a cornerstone of how you conduct yourself and how your life is structured in the way that you manage yourself.
I was just thinking about that, kind of just even personally how I approach my life, and in some of Abe's answers, I basically feel like I've duplicated myself. It's like my twin over there. For a lot of years, my input, my greatest teaching is I seek it out, podcasts, books, my own study. And it, unfortunately, the Western church has become so individual that the idea that in Mexico, the way the whole community rotated around the concept of church is so much more, it's their culture too. And so even having watched, posts from this pastor over the years and stuff, and just seeing how the people are very engaged with one another as well. I think that's something, even myself, I'm not used to that. That's just not something we have anymore. And because the biggest piece that is missing in that scenario is the body. And I just listened to a sermon about this. I had not really thought about it. I've always thought body life was important. But the idea that God comes and he is building a building for himself to dwell in. That's what it looks like to be in eternity in the final kingdom. And it's the building that is the acceptable sacrifice. It is not the individuals. It does not mean that each stone does not matter in the building, but it is the building working together that becomes the dwelling of the Lord. That's the call of the church, is to cultivate something that looks like that in the end. And I don't even know how to say to do it.
Well, and I think going back to that, you do have to look for these things. Like what we were just saying, there's a lot of blind trust that, I'm going to church, this is my fill, this is it. So I think finding a good church that's actually going to challenge you, finding places where you can get plugged in and kind of find that community. I do think that's something that you really have to look for and try to find.
Kelly and I at one point were visiting a bunch of different churches, just like once a month. We just go to one that was in town, or in the next town over or whatever, and just to go see it. And people would ask, right away, are you guys, no, we're just, we have one, and we're just kind of visiting. And there was this disappointment, or there was they kind of came down, when they were talking to us, and they almost didn't understand. And I said, one of the things that I would say over and over again was, we kind of have this idea that churches themselves are these individual islands, and they need to stay individual islands. And there's something good about that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to structure everything, but it's the idea that you canoe from one island to another like that. Like that's unheard of. It's like, well, we're just islands. It's like, nah, I feel like there needs to be a lot more cross communication, a lot more people interacting, a lot more going, back and forth with us and being part of that one body in the one building like you were talking about.
Abe, circling back to the beginning, did you have a first impression of Todd that you wanted to share with the group?
I don't know if I want to hear it.
I think I remember the first time, but I don't know what your first time remembering is.
I don't remember what my first would be, because I don't remember if you guys were youth group leaders before we boxed or not.
Yeah, I think you were.
Probably, yeah.
What do you think my first impression was? Because I just remember getting hit in the head.
Maybe that's where everything got cleared out at that moment. Yeah, after that. We had been at like a fellowship thing at someone's house, and for like a mealtime or whatever. And you guys were still fairly young, but I was divorced and probably a couple of years under the belt. And the kids were wanting to play first-person shooter games. And I
remember this now. Oh.
And this is one of my first impressions.
Okay, yeah. No.
But so I had posed the question maybe to the group, maybe to Todd, I don't remember, but just like, I'm not sure what age is appropriate for that to start. At 13, 16, whatever, first-person shooter games. And it launched you on to, I felt like a 10-minute lecture at a very accelerated decibel of voice about how video games were used to train, the military to be desensitized, to be able to kill people and all these research things. But at the end, you're like, but I don't know, let him play it if you want, I guess, if you want a murderer or something like that. And I was like, and then
you want to make a bell tower shooter, go for it.
Then like 5 minutes later, oh yeah, I play him all the time. And I'm like, I can't get a read on this guy. But we left, we walked out, and we're all kind of walking out, and the kids kind of had this like shell-shocked look on their face. And I was like, I just think you need to understand that like Todd talks loud, but he's not really angry. He's just very emphatic. And that was, I just remember thinking, I wonder what they're thinking right now. But is that the first, do you remember that? No.
I remember that. I don't remember saying everything. I have a different version of it in my head, but yours is probably correct. So, yeah, I speak from the lower diaphragm. So, I always sound angry, and I get more and more animated, and I get louder and louder and louder. I'm constantly speaking at a whisper, like when I'm in a regular, and then when I actually speak at my regular speaking point, people are like, "Why are you shouting?" I'm not shouting at all. What are you talking about?
I don't think I've ever seen you whisper. I think I can't see Kelly's face from here, but I'm thinking she's rolling her eyes.
Well, no, we had talked before about, as far as like young adults and where you guys are at in the church and what are they addressing, what not. What are the things that they're not addressing? Like we had talked before, like porn is a huge thing that's going on right now. Before, back in the late 70s, early 80s or whatever, if you saw a dirty magazine or something like that, it's not like I walked outside and had access to it, and then went to the grocery store, still had access to it, and then went and filled up the tank in my car, still had access to it. Like now, you have access to this 24/7, anytime you want to, in a pocket device. And then not only that, but when we think of pornography, we tend to think of it as only a male area thing. The number of women that are interacting within what I would call like traditional pornography or video or image based is growing, which I would argue is super bad for a number of different reasons. But we tend to that 50 Shades of Grey, we all act like that's not porn. Okay, it is. It's porn for women.
It's a training manual to find an abusive man.
Oh, it absolutely is too.
I don't understand how basically media and Hollywood speak out of both sides of their mouth. This is wrong, but let's promote a book in which that's the only thing you're looking for is someone to treat you that way. It's not good. Sorry, I have strong feelings.
Well, and how they all glorify gun violence, and then on the other side of their mouth, all say we need to ban all guns. It's like you guys have been showing guns irresponsibly for the last 60 years. Stop it. Stop doing that. And just the hypocrisy of just so many things. I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is this something you guys are seeing being addressed within younger culture, within the church, in speaking to younger people? Is this something that's being ignored entirely, the way I guess too many people in the past have kind of treated it? What are you guys seeing? How is it showing up?
I think our church does a good job of talking about it. I don't think it's super in-depth. It's just like this is a thing that a lot of people struggle with. But I also think our church is an anomaly in that area. I I feel like most churches that I walk into don't. It's very like, don't worry, treat thy neighbor well. It's like, okay, but what does that mean? What does that look like on a day-to-day level? So I don't think a lot of that's what I mean when I say like people are coming in and just blindly accepting it. It's because no one's speaking that truth and saying like, this is bad or this is how it looks like outside of the church. It's like we're all kind of trained to be like, on a base level, know what's right and wrong, and then we're supposed to like keep that image up is how I feel about it.
Abe, you've talked before about the absence of much detail given, and my experience, okay, so for old people experience in the churches I've been in, it is pornography, this is the example we kind of landed on, is acknowledged, but usually very much like, well, there's a porn problem. I know I've made everyone uncomfortable. And then they just kind of zip past because they themselves are uncomfortable. And I know you've mentioned that your pastor currently had spoken very well about it. And the one thing that you felt was missing was a little bit more education on what to do. So I don't know if you have any ideas of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because he did well. He was, most people are like, well, if you just pray about it, it'll go away. It's like, well, this is a new era of addiction and technology, and you don't even understand it if you think you can drop it in a second like that. Mm-hmm. Like, and he didn't say that at our church. He's like, look, if this is something you're struggling with, like, I'm not preaching about it, but we got counselors and stuff that you can talk to and stuff like that. But there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, in my very niche interests of theology and then also this like scientific bettering of yourself, there's a lot of people out there seeing it for what it is and kind of like looking around like, are we gonna do something about this now? Like, and there's a lot of people I think our age, and there's older people and younger people, and they're like, they want help. They're like, I don't know how to help myself with this, and it's like ruining my life. And I think Andrew Huberman has good resources for that. Fight the New Drug has good resources for that. The Bible is very helpful for that. Like,
so one of the things that you've said before, like that it's fine enough to say, you need to quit. And I've encountered a lot of people who just say, well, you just stop. You just got to stop. And okay, maybe. But you've talked more about, wouldn't it be great to have an educational, like retraining the brain or spending your time differently, understanding your triggers, getting basic counseling, those kinds of things. Is there any one place that kind of promotes that kind of, practical application that you know of, or is that just still something that's still needed?
Fight the New Drug does that well.
Okay.
They kind of do like the base level. You need to understand what the porn industry is, and it's the most racist, bigoted, sexist, homophobic, hateful industry there is, and is making a whole lot of money on all of those things. And Fight the New Drug will give you that perspective, and they'll also touch on like what is happening inside of you that's making you want to do this. Like, it's the same thing that happens when you eat a chocolate bar. Like, it's just helpful knowledge, like, to know that. And then the Bible provides that like kind of like third context of when you're engaging with this content, what are you saying to God? What are you saying to women? What are you saying to yourself? Like, that kind of stuff. So
don't get me wrong, I think it's good there's an organization that's doing this, at least one. I know there are probably more, obviously. But you were saying before, they're not biased, they're not religious, they're not political, they're not. And I think that would be in order to hit that shotgun blast as wide as possible, in order to draw as many people in as possible, in order to help get people started on a path and an avenue to start managing this and putting it in its proper place in their life. I don't see too many Christian organizations doing this. Now, granted, I'm not immersed in this area of things. Are there Christian organizations that are out there that you see addressing this issue? What are things that are going on in a younger person's life that Christianity seems to be ignoring entirely, that it should be addressing, that it's not talking about? I'm not just porn or drinking, for example. Maybe there are other things that you guys both see a need that's just not being addressed.
I can go ahead. I mean, I think to the first part of that, I don't know of any Christian organizations. I mean, there are like influencers out there who are like, yeah, I struggle with porn. That was part of our marriage, like, and very open about it. And I think that is growing. With all of this stuff, you kind of see like a tidal wave of introduction to society, and then like 30 years later, people are like, okay, whoa, like, I don't think my kid's benefiting from Instagram. Like, what can we do about this? And so I think we're on the cusp of that as a society, especially in like my interests. People are kind of waking up and being like, wait, I think this is actually really bad for you.
I also think because the church doesn't talk about these things, then people struggle alone, and then they don't create the resources necessary to help people, because people don't feel like they can say, hey, I have this, or I'm struggling with alcohol. It's like most of the time my experience has been, it's very blanket statements of like, if you're struggling, there's someone up here that can pray for you. But it's not like people don't want to be honest about it. So then I don't think people create the resources necessary to help them. But I do agree that there's probably on the cusp of it.
When I would argue or add to that, that one of the resources you need to deal with anything, I'm just really angry and I'm 13 and I don't know what to do with that, is a interpersonal relationship with someone in the church. And it's not, that doesn't happen when you go up and you pray at the altar call and then you don't talk to that person ever again. Like, you need to spend time with this person and develop a relationship to the point where it's like,
you can come over to their house and punch them in the face in the garage. Yeah.
Like the first conversation you're not going to have with anybody is, hey, I'm like struggling with pornography addiction. Can you help me with that? People go, what's your last name again?
Right.
Well, but I do feel like that's the attitude, is like, hey, there's this random Joe, like he's going to take the place of what your father should have been. It's like, I just came. This is my first week. So I do think that would be beneficial to kind of.
And it kind of gets back to that concept we talk about all the time, is that it is relationship. We're supposed to be in relationship. We're supposed to be in fellowship. And part of that is building trust, building the body, and building those interactions where you get to a point where you can come to another person and say, hey, man, I got this area of my life that it's falling apart. Do we have resources here? Do we got somebody that's had a similar experience, somebody I can talk to, and try to move forward with this in order to make sure that it doesn't completely take things over? We stop that interpersonal connection and then wonder what happened. Why is it not working?
From your perspective, Abe, what do you feel, there's been 3 different couples all involved in youth group at different times that have been a large part of meeting a void in your life. What do you think they did well in order to do that over a long span of time?
I don't think those people came into my life and said, because there were people that came into my life and were like, I'm going to be your father figure. And I was like, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. And so I think like not having that, like just being like, look, like you go to my church, like we should hang out sometime. I like to play video games too. Like, let's do that. Like on an authentic connection, I think they did what they talked about and they're consistently involved.
I was going to say, I think
it wasn't a phase.
Right. Because there have been people over the years who've said that to me. Oh, I think that's what we'd like to do, is we like to be a fun person for your boys. One, if you know a single mom in your arena, please don't go up to them and pretend that you know how to fill the void, because you don't know what it is yet. And so I understand sociologically and biblically that a father role is very, very important. But it implies when you put that on a single mom that she's not making up some of the difference. I would never be able to be a dad. That's true. But there are ways that you are plugging that hole and meeting needs. And so for someone to come up and kind of imply that you're not and that you never could, I don't know, maybe that's just me being sensitive, but it does happen. So that's the one step, is it's not coming in assuming you know what the role needs to be and what's not being met. But there were many people who said that and phased out very quickly. And that was hard to watch because you guys were looking for something, And so the consistency, the committing to doing something and then continually doing that and then keeping that relationship a priority. So that has made a world of difference for all of you boys. So I think that's what it can look like, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think that also, like, I know your youngest son plays chess with the guy, and I don't know how often they do it or anything, but I know it's something they've been doing for a while. And sometimes it can just be as simple as that, is getting involved in establishing relationship. They talk about things, I'm sure, that nobody else is going to be able to talk or approach a subject about, because of the way that they have an interaction, the way that relationship is built. It has been built over time. It's not like, a quick thing, And I think there's value in that. So it doesn't always have to be just one person interacting with somebody. There's many different ways and many different needs in which the body kind of plugs in and fills, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he jokes like, yeah, you know, I might be the armpit of the body, but I still have a point. You know what I mean? I still get to, you know.
Well, and that's a good point is there were 3 men there, you know, in this process, and they each brought different things to the table that each boy has commented on, each son has noticed and said that I know what this looks like in adult life because I saw it there. It is a good thing to have that, to have a number of people willing to do that. I think it was just one of the hugest, I hate the word, but blessings of the community we were involved in for the years that we were, was those 3 people were in their lives. So it does matter, and it is worth speaking to. And a large part of that was 3 different men who were willing to speak to very serious issues and try to encourage the boys to know what it was to be a man, but also practical things, you know, like how do you change your brakes? Oh, come on over, I'll show you how. There is just that willingness to engage. You don't have to be one kind of person in order to do it, is my point. So I have no idea what question we were on. I mean, have we covered everything? Is there anything you guys would like to criticize my parenting? To talk about, you know, what you want for Christmas? Anything else? Is that, you know, we're good?
What do you guys think? We'll do the last question here, and we'll wrap things up. So, what do you guys think as far as where you're at in your lives and what's going on? What is the one thing that you wish maybe people knew about the challenges and the difficulties, or the blessings and the great things that are going on that people don't amplify enough? Is there an area or something that you guys are seeing that is not paid enough attention to, or too much and inflated?
I do think, like, now with the younger generation, or just how church has evolved in general, is we do want authenticity. We do want people to talk about those things. So I think it's headed in a really good direction. Like, I still think we have a long way to go, so that's kind of counter what I said earlier. But I think it's like, we're not okay with just coming on Sundays. We want this to be something that we do throughout our life. We want a community that we can engage in. So I do think that is something that's been good.
Bring more of it into the identity of who you actually are. Identity is a big issue in culture right now.
Yes.
And bring more of it into who you are, and integrate yourself more, integrate it more, and kind of that symbiotic kind of thing.
Right. Or just like talking about difficult subjects. Like, hey, I actually do struggle with sexual immorality. Like, are there people like that vulnerability to kind of take that step to be like, oh, wait, there does need to be resources, or like that is a need in the church. I think for needs in general, this was something posed to me in college, but it was like, think of any social issue and what's the solution? It's the church. So it's like, imagine if every homeless person knew, you know, where I'd get taken care of is the church. I just think if that's what that is for, and so if people can step up and make things like that, it would be really helpful.
Well, it's the church always claims to have the solution to all the problems of the world, so to speak. We need to start acting like it and start doing stuff about it. Yeah. How about for you, Abe? What do you see, or what do you think?
I think in the church, in our culture, in the workplace, like, everything is so about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and stuff like that. I think, I don't know, just with what we've just been talking about, like, I think people need to relax, like, chill out and just be friends. If that makes sense. I don't know, it sounds like a rom-com thing, but like, everything's so tense and divided, and everything matters, and some things do matter and some don't. It's like, I don't know, I think there's a lot of power in just sitting back and be like, oh, this is the person I work with, I sit next to them at work, I'm gonna try to get to know them. We don't have to be best friends. I'm not gonna talk to them because I want them to think I'm a good person. I'm just really close to be friends. Like, the difference that makes in people's lives, I think, is understood.
That's one of the areas I think Laura's talked about a lot. Sometimes we don't need to go out and deliver the gospel and speaking the words and saying the things. Sometimes you deliver it just by working next to them, just by living your life. It shows. By putting words in your silent mouth.
As long as they're the right words. So that was the right answer. Yep.
There we go. I get a gold star for getting the right answer. And on that note, thank you very much for joining us for this second episode and doing something a little bit different, having guests in studio. Abe and Addie, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us. Really do appreciate it. And thanks. And so thank you to everybody for listening and sticking through both episodes on this. Remember, if you want to reach out to either Laura or myself, or you got a question for Abe and Addie, maybe you're interested in some of the things and organizations that they talked about or brought up, you can reach us at naughtyversus, VERSUS, nice at gmail.com. And don't forget to, if you did enjoy the episode, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating, and make a comment on any of the podcasting apps that you're using. It does help the algorithm and puts us out there a little bit further, so hopefully we can reach more people and they can hear what Abe and Addie actually had to say about what's going on for the youngsters out there and the challenges that they're facing. Thank you very much, and we will talk at you next time.